Welcome to the digital airways of Storyophonic. We're proud to introduce you to the members of a very special community. Those in the spotlight and behind the scenes, the people and the personalities who make the music happen. I'm Dan Kimpel. We're proud to continue with our mission to entertain and inform you as we reveal tips and tales from deep inside the music industry. Named one of Billboard magazine's top 40 industry-shaping executives, Jess Furman's endeavors span multiple sectors of music, film, tech, new media, Web3, and nonprofit advocacy. Balancing musical intuition and executive expertise, Jess has established a notable niche in an ever-shifting business while emerging as a powerful champion for creatives. As she shares, when you provide opportunities to succeed, everyone wins. We take a deep dive with the newly elected governor of the Los Angeles Chapter Board of the Recording Academy, explore her dedication to the future of music and her commitment to a community of creators. You came over the hill to be with us. Welcome, Jess Furman.
Thank you for having me.
How was your drive?
You know what? I'm just happy to see real people that aren't on a computer screen. So we do everything remote, even studio work. So this is actually a joy to be here.
Oh, that's so interesting. Is that a carryover from the plague years, or is that just the way it goes?
I think so. I remember getting our studios ready during the pandemic so that a lot of singers and people we worked with could work remote, and people just kind of didn't go back as much. So, yeah, I was surprised.
Music is obviously such a collaborative art.
Yeah.
But we know very famously a lot of great records and a lot of great projects that were nowhere near each other. So That's interesting. But you and I are in one place at one time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we're like 4 feet apart, and
Yep.
Here we are. In the intro, we referenced the point that you are now a governor at the Recording Academy.
Yes, LA chapter.
To foster change, you look forward to joining leaders dedicated to driving music forward.
Yes.
How cool is that?
I'm so excited. I'm so honored. We had our first kickoff meeting, and I just, to sit in a room of people that I've just respected and admired for so long, and then peers that I've come up with, and look around the room and just realize how much we all just love music and we love what we do, and we want to make sure that this is a profession that people can continue to do. So just to be able to get a chance to be of service is just such an honor.
We've been very interested in changes at the Academy. We've seen a lot of changes. A number of people who are on the governor's board. Lynn Earls has been our guest, obviously.
Yes, I love Lynn.
Yes. The very retiring Claudia Brandt, the very shy girl.
Love Claudia,
Brandt.
yeah, total wallflower.
It's great to see this level of folks working
Yeah.
on behalf of and fostering change.
Yeah.
Because things have to change.
They do.
They do.
The world changes. We got to change with it.
This is true. This is true. Well, you've certainly been through a lot of changes in your career. Multi-hyphenate of many, many different dimensions.
Yes.
Interesting that you have both skill sets. I mean, you're a music maker, songwriter, performer, et cetera, and then you have this whole executive thing that you do as well.
Yeah.
Are those obviously they're compatible for you, correct?
Yeah, I think starting off as a singer-songwriter, and we had talked previous to this about Ani DeFranco. I had some really great role models where they took control, like Righteous Babe Records. She started her own record label, and so I kind of think I went into music kind of wanting to own a space for myself. And I always had an aptitude for business, and I always had an aptitude for advocacy and justice. And so I think as my creative career was evolving, I realized I had this aptitude and kind of just kept folding it into, what I was doing, and, making sure that if whatever I was learning, I was sharing with my friends, and then realizing maybe I had a better aptitude to get them work than they did, and kind of building my career around a combination of both.
It behooves one to learn how the business works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, talking about evolution of technology in music, people don't have the benefit of hoping that they're good enough and they're going to get scrapped up by this dream record deal, right? I mean, and the plus side is you can purchase a home computer, you can learn how to produce, you can wear many hats. The downside is you're expected to be at a certain level in your career. I think no matter what hat you wear as a musician, that requires you to step into a realm that maybe you never thought you'd have to, when you dreamed of being, a professional musician.
Well, all of that is cool. How do you pick what to work on? Now, so That was that.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
many projects coexist with multiple timelines?
Yes, that's fair. So
Yeah.
I will say, as long as I am not on the road touring, which I haven't done in years. So, you'd be surprised how many more hours you have in a day when you know where your meals are coming from and you know where you're sleeping and you get a good night's sleep, So I think it's that hustle, right? Like once I started staying in one place and realized I really wanted to delve into producing and writing writing for TV and film and kind of had a home base, it just opened up a lot of time for me. When I built up Sound Revolver, my production company, I realized one of the skill sets that I had was I didn't have to take a swing at the things that I wasn't the best at, And when I had a room at Hollywood Sound, I could play something on keys, but if I could tap my buddy from upstairs, he's gonna play it better than I am, And the drummer's gonna play it, better than I would kind of program the drums. So I kind of evolved into this collaborative process with the work that I was bringing in. And I think, the more projects I got, thankfully for me, I knew when to take a swing at it and I knew when to maybe oversee the creative. And by overseeing the creative, for me, it was just I did speak both of those languages. So when a director or producer or a client in ad world would ask for something that I knew would hurt the feelings of that creative, I could kind of, play the middle and be, okay, that's great. Yes, I know those claps sound terrible after the second bridge. We'll probably go back to the first idea, but the director's going to want to hear this, So I think when it comes down to what projects I take, I just hiring my creative friends has always just been I think one of the highlights of my career as I evolved into getting more and more work and just seeing that I had an ability to connect those dots. So I take the projects creatively that I know I'll add the most to, whether by my own creativity, my own writing, or if I have it in my network and I think I can put the pieces together. So that's usually how I make a creative decision at this point.
Can you tell by listening to something if it's going to work for sync or if it's not going to work for sync?
Well, I mean, I would say yes and no, right? So I would say if you're saying the likelihood that you're going to get something synced, yes. So if you're I want to have a song that I can probably get licensed in a bunch of different places, yes. Then I can hear something and I'll know what's trending. I'll know the way the song is structured. That's also really important. I did a lot of work with, I don't know if you know Marty Dodson and Clay Mills, but with Songtown. So I did a seminar about a year or so ago, once a month with them. And it was really interesting teaching people how to write for TV and film that have that background, the Nashville songwriting style, because they set up the song, right? They're precious in the most wonderful of ways, but I'm you have 15 to 30 seconds if you're lucky. You can't get to the punchline in the bridge or in, the second verse or, the last line of the song. You kind of have to, get it across a little quicker if you're writing a song that you want to be, quote unquote, a little more syncable. So if it's something that I think will get licensed over and over again, yes, I can hear it. But that being said, there's so many wide needs for media that sometimes it's this random song that you heard someone play somewhere, and we've signed people off of something that we know we might only be able to place once, but maybe once or twice because it's just so quirky that it works in those different scenarios. And I think as long as you manage those expectations too, if you're hey, listen, your sound is very niche, maybe I'll get asked for this once a year, but I'm willing to send it in when I get asked for this once a year.
I've heard people who critique music sometimes, if they don't know what to say, they'll say, that could work for film or TV. But it's just the most wide, general.
Yeah.
Well, yes, it conceivably could.
Yeah.
I discover a lot of music, especially older music that I'm not familiar with by watching television shows, by watching a show like Hacks.
Yes.
That will use really a kind of obscure TK R&B from the early 70s. And it's then you want to dig. I mean, I want to dig and see what I've missed, put those pieces together.
Well, I mean, these music supervisors are music fans, but to the 100th power, right? And so, a lot of times you'll see things that are they'll pick up on trends ahead of time because remember with the lead time on some of these shows, they don't necessarily want the hit that's already on the radio because it's not going to land when that show's out. So you can see some of the trends with the different series or they'll go to these underground, spaces or these small little showcases and they really kind of help drive a lot of what gets discovered because they have their finger on the pulse of what's the next wave.
It was interesting watching that evolution happen.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden it really became sort of the music supervisors became like superstars. And we knew who they were. We could call them out by name.
Yes.
We knew who had supervised various things. So
yes.
That's great. And all these outlets and all the media we have right now certainly opens up for more sync opportunities, which is great.
Yeah. There are times, if you think about the amount of music that needs to get used places. I think, and again, my orientation aside from the Recording Academy is also I was on the board of SONA, and when we helped pass the Music Modernization Act, I helped form the Web3 Music Rights Group. I think we just rebranded it as Media, Entertainment, Technology, just because there's so many other things emerging with AI that we're trying to address, those concerns. So there were definitely a lot more opportunities, but also you have to know how to negotiate the value of your song, right?
Sure.
Because it's with all this emerging technology and opportunity, there is a propensity for them to devalue that copyright and say, we're just going to, use this level of library or only pay you this amount for it, or we can't possibly track the usage for your royalties. So I think, it's the need to advocate more opportunity, but the need to know your rights and how to advocate for collecting and being paid fairly is really important.
We'll be right back after this. This season of Storyophonic is sponsored by Novation, creators of the iconic Launchpad and LaunchKey MIDI controllers. Novation's creative instruments allow you to translate ideas into reality, channeling your artistic energy to create new music. Novation seeks to inspire. You mentioned SONA, Songwriters of North America.
Yes.
We've been happy to have with us. Kay Hanley has been here. Michelle Lewis has
yes,
been here.
I love both of them
Shelley
so much.
Piken has
Shelley,
been here,
yes.
who I've known for a while.
Yep.
And Dina LaPolt.
Yep.
Who's
Rock star. Total
rock
rock star
star lawyer.
attorney.
It's great to see people working in those communities on behalf of so many things.
Yeah.
And I know with SONA also, you were involved also in grants for...
Yeah, so when the pandemic happened, we were trying to figure out how to address, just the fact that no one was doing session work, shows were being canceled. And so for us, it was, typically SONA is an advocacy organization focused around rights, education, and policy, right? Like talking to change makers, lawmakers, and making sure that our voice is represented in a lot of these, emerging technologies and the royalty conversations. But we kind of pulled together pretty quickly and created the Songwriter Fund. And we came up with a process where people could apply. We were giving out $500 grants if they were just experiencing financial hardship during the pandemic. And we ended up giving away, I think, at least $500,000 initially. Yeah. But we moved pretty quickly on it because people were terrified, they weren't, I know so many people were affected by the pandemic, but if you're a live musician, if you have concerts and you're an artist, if you, even being in studios and session work, or you're writing on shows and the shows are shut down, that's a hard hit, so it was really special to be a part of that.
SONA has changed the world, which is amazing to see. And,
again, I think you want people who genuinely care, who are songwriters and who, what was one of the special things about being part of SONA was, Kay Hanley, amazing artist, writer. She works on all these shows. Michelle Lewis. Just the whole gang initially. Brendan Okrent was actually who got me in there. And she had actually was the person who springboarded my entire career. I had applied through the mail for the ASCAP Lester Sill workshop when I first moved to LA. Yes. And years later, she was like, "Did we find you through the mail?" And it was the only thing in my life I've ever put in an envelope and sent in and just been like, "Please." I didn't know anyone in LA. But when Brendan said that she had joined this initiative with SONA at the very beginning, I just donated and I was count me in, and anything you're part of, I want to be part of, and slowly kind of got a little bit more into the fold with it. But just a genuine group of people that really care about creators and also are just really smart and willing to read the fine print. And it's not fun to read the fine print. No, that's not, we don't get into music to read the fine print. Yeah. Maybe to look at, drum patterns and, tweak a guitar till it's just about right, or, get the vocals. If I'm going to be focusing on anything, I would love it to be that. But you need people that are willing to look at the fine print in that sense as well.
I love the story about Lester Sill Workshop. And that was a big deal. And and I'm referencing Brendan Okrent. We all have deep ties to Brendan Okrent. We know her very well. So great to hear her. And she was a champion of my career as well.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Brendan was she recommended to hire me to do on-camera interviews to the ASCAP Pop Awards.
Oh, cool.
So there I was with Tom Petty or Elvis Costello or Rick James and just all these people. And it was very helpful to me. The Emmys Television Academy nomination, The Book of Queer.
Yes.
So interesting. Guest narrators like Margaret Cho, Alex Newell, the late Leslie Jordan was on that, and Ross Matthews, who we all know as the intern, and beyond.
Yep.
But so interesting to document that kind of history.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's probably one of the most. It is the most special project I've ever been part of for a couple reasons. One was, I'm part of the queer community, and thinking about how much history is hetero washed, right? So you look and everyone's like, wow, there's so many more queer people out now or around. And you're like, well, like the premise of the show was like, we've always been here. Here's thousands of years of, stories and history and things across all different types of, professions. But for the Book of Queer, so when I actually, I saw this last week with a friend, I went into a Facebook group called the Pink Mafia, and they had posted about a music-driven series with this kind of queer slant in mind, and they hadn't talked about music, but I cold pitched them. I said, listen, I know you're talking about showrunners, but I'm part of the community and I have a huge Rolodex, and I would really love to be part of this for when you start thinking about music. And they brought me in to executive music direct the series. We had a music video at the end of each episode, and when I say it was my favorite project, it was because I can't tell you how many times I've been tokenized as either a woman or someone as part of the LGBTQ community, where they're like, okay, well, we're going to check our diversity inclusivity box because you're on it, right? And I'm like, well, do you want everyone on, of course, how, everybody that I hire has to be part of the community. What are the rules? And they're like, oh, no, you count. With Book of Queer, they were like, we want you to find us like, people who are part of the community, who are producers, who are writers, who are artists. So at the end of each episode of Book of Queer, there's a full-on dance number with a music video, and all of those artists are actually part of the community. We have everything, like Two-Spirit, lesbian, gay, trans, like just some of the most special artists, and then all those songs were written and original for the series. So really special project.
Nice. Two-Spirit. Yeah.
Two-Spirit.
Native American. Yeah,
Yep.
Native American reference.
Yep. Shawnee Kish, actually,
So
who had, I
interesting.
think she has a Juno Award, actually, from Canada. She flew from Canada to do her song. Yeah.
That's great. But that history is so interesting. So, yeah, we can cruise the bars with Abraham Lincoln. Who knew? I thought by the outfit, probably. I wanted to ask you about also an organization, is it called Blue Dao?
Yeah, Blue Dao.
Cool. Tell us about that.
So this traipses into blockchain, Web3. Most people know it by NFTs. How I got into it was when I was with Big Noise. We were getting a lot of requests for NFT projects for artists, and I was heading up their licensing division, and I didn't know enough about it. So I started going to conferences, and I just kind of fell in love with the whole promise of what blockchain is for creatives. I think we've gotten used to the internet being something with social media where we provide free content and then these tech companies benefit from it, and you look at like the Spotifys and the Pandoras. And so, we've kind of deprioritized art, right? Whereas with blockchain, there are ways to create ecosystems that take out some of that structure and really put the power back in the hands of the creatives. It's intensely complicated because it's so early, but I'm a nerd. So I ended up having an idea for how to kind of change copyright collection for creatives. And I went and was speaking at a conference about it. I ended up getting a keynote. I spoke at the PopTech conference in DC about revolutionizing creative ecosystems utilizing the new technology. And the slant was kind of, hey guys, this is your tech realm, but these are our issues with our databases, with royalty collection, with mismatch funds. Like, can we come together? Can we maybe use this amazing new tech? Can you guys build for us? And over the course of that, I ended up landing a scholarship to go to Amsterdam, and I did my first hackathon, and we won. And I was there with the founders of Blue DAO, and they asked me to be a governor of their DAO. And for the next year, on and off, I traveled around the world to hackathons. And what was really special about Blue DAO was their mission was to educate women and non-binary into the Web3 space. You didn't have to have prior experience. So it was a really special community that I got to be part of, that we took over 250 women and non-binary on scholarships to about, I'd say 20 different global locations over the course of a year and a half. All hackathons. We did educational camps with them. It was really, really incredible.
Web3 for our less initiated people, sort of an umbrella term for
Yes.
technologies like blockchain. It
Yes.
decentralizes data ownership, correct?
Yes.
And control on the internet. Okay. So where does AI figure into that equation?
So I think that AI is definitely the shiny new thing. I think there were a lot of rug pulls with NFTs and blockchain. I think probably what will end up happening, at least with Web3, is there are elements of it that'll be integrated, but I'm a huge advocate for building in a space and not letting the technology dictate the terms, right? And we all saw that happening when we went from records to MP3s to Napster and Kazaa, right? And suddenly now we have, digital streaming services, right? We let the technology dictate the market. So I don't think Web3 is gone. I just think that it needs a little better positioning in terms of how people can get involved in it, and definitely builders in that space. AI is a very similar thing, and I want to kind of break down artificial intelligence. There's a lot of machine learning that's being touted as artificial intelligence, and it's a bit of a debated line, but we've been using machine learning for a very, very long time.
Tell me more.
So machine learning is just essentially, the most basic level would be you go to a Google search engine, right? And you have you put in a search and there's some sort of algorithm that then gives you an output, right? There's an input, there's an output. When you're using things, say, as a producer, right? And you're having it analyze a waveform, and you're having it tell you, or slap on a preset or a plugin, right? It analyzes the data you put in and it comes up with a recommendation on the other side. So, there are elements of AI that we see in science fiction. There are elements of what's being called AI that people are afraid because it's generating music. But, we've been using these tools for a really long time. So I think the question is twofold, like in terms of how this affects musicians. Not that you asked that specific question, but just I think that, first of all, if you're afraid of something, which I think a lot of people are, in this space, it means you should charge towards it in terms of educating. Because again, we saw how the market was dictated when people weren't sure how MP3s were going to impact the market, right? And people just kind of sat back and were like, what's going to happen here? And then we got handed with this horrible system that we have where Spotify is now rebundling, us with podcasts and other things to lower the fees. So in this case with artificial intelligence, there are a lot of ways to integrate it as tools. So one is educate yourself as a creative. How do I use this tool on behalf of my art? The other half is the right side, right? Like how do I maintain a sense of fair ownership over my creative work? So I think it has to be both, right? How do I use it as a tool? How do I protect my creative copyrights? But it's out of the bag. So there's no putting AI back in the bag. This is the state of the world. So I think just, running towards it instead of maybe just waiting to get handed a less favorable situation.
Sure. And we're always economic concerns and how those economics are funneled back to creative people. And, how is that accountable? How, where does that come from?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
But all of us that create in some ways have seen something that we have created being used or adapted, whether we permitted it or not. It just kind of is out there.
Right.
So, I think all of that, that's just part of, it's kind of built into what we know. I read a quote from you, getting away from the pay your dues and the ghost writing mentality.
Oh, I don't believe in that at all. Yeah. I don't. I think if you manage to open a door, turn around and open your arms to the people behind you to walk through it, Yeah. A lot about being part of, the academy, or at least my peer group in the academy, is I have a really strong group of women that we've, there weren't a lot of women producers. When I first built out my studio, I actually took my name off all the credits and I came up with the name Sound Revolver because people saw me as a folk singer-songwriter. I'd been signed to Secret Road. Uh-huh. No one wanted to hire me as a producer. They couldn't believe that I knew how to work anything having to do with recording or play a guitar. So, for me, I had to get to a certain point, but then when I got to this point in my career, I had come across people who had asked me to ghost for them and I didn't have a choice. And there was an element of paying my dues where I worked 8 jobs and I just showed up and wrote for songs in major studios with major producers who I won't name, who later on I found out were billing me out by the hour. They were collecting my, years later I had maybe 1 or 2 managers call me and they're like, hey, is your rate the same when you're not working on a record with X producer? And I'm like, what? I wasn't getting paid. I was showing up and they were giving me coffee. And I had worked, maybe at a bar the night before to be able to be in the studio. I was just so honored to be in that space. Yeah. So I would never want to put anyone through that. So I have a solid group of, people who I know that have the same ethos, and we just try to turn around and educate the people around us, and we don't sacrifice excellence. It's not about lowering the bar. It's just about not, forcing people to hop through unnecessary hurdles when it's a hurdle enough to make a living as a musician without that.
Yes. Yeah. You referenced Secret Road. They were very early on. That's Lynn Grossman, right?
Yeah.
Really quality
amazing
stuff.
Yeah.
Really quality music. And I think one of the first people I was aware that really raised the bar for what we were hearing now was Ingrid Michaelson.
And Ingrid Michaelson was their flagship because Lynn was managing Ingrid. Yeah. It was Miko, Kate Vogel. So I kind of, I got signed at the forefront of really amazing singer-songwriters. And, I was really, really grateful to get that opportunity to work with them. I'd say like what they built is pretty remarkable. Like they're the go-to when it comes to, just really impactful, amazing singer-songwriters in the space. So, but again, I think like, some of my lessons that I'd learned from being with Secret Road back in the day was initially I was getting a ton of placements. And this is actually something I think you'd mentioned something earlier that made me think about this, the opportunity for licensing. When people were purchasing records, you could make a really amazing living as a sync artist, right? Yeah. Those fees were a lot higher because they couldn't get a major artist. Major artists didn't want their music in a Taco Bell ad or in any of they didn't want it in a TV show, right? And then, when there was this evolution of, the DSPs and digital music and MP3s, and all of a sudden record sales go away, now you have all these major bands and artists being willing, they're seeing visual media and sync as another revenue stream for them. And what that ended up doing for artists like me at the time, like my price points for my songs went from like, like 40 to 50 grand and up to like, 10, 8, 7, because now all these bands are getting those higher fees. So it was interesting to kind of see that whole thing shift. And my biggest lesson with Secret Road was to diversify myself, because even though they did a lot of amazing things in the beginning, I saw that trend where bigger artists were willing to license. My fees were going down. Secret Road was doing amazing, but they were also went from having a roster of like a handful to hundreds of amazing people better than me. And that's really what made me get into producing my own music and producing for TV and film, like teaching myself how to record and setting up a studio, because I wanted a lot more flexibility than just having me as an artist being able to license my one record, so diversifying.
That's great. That's great. At one point I was moderating a panel, and somebody from the sync world, they were talking about, at that time, network television. So it was a few years back, but not that long ago. And they said, well, you understand, theoretically, a music supervisor is looking for something to fill a spot. But if that spot, they have the option of maybe somebody whose career is advancing and generating and already building and can bring us viewers, yes, they're going to get the shot. Yeah, that was something that shifted, I think, also, again, trend of artists being willing to be part of something, but also with playlisting, because it was a huge boost for them to be able to do a playlist or to offer an on-screen credit for that artist. It'd be amazing because, I'm being on the Big Noise side of things, when I set up their division, we had artists and bands that were bigger that were willing to do license deals because for them it was promotions. So they would do some sports placements where like the fees were pretty terrible, but it was their new single. They got it at the bottom of the TV screen. And, again, great for them for exposure, not great for someone trying to make a living as a sync artist that now, this massive band is willing to take that fee. Yeah. It just drives the rest of it. down. Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Big Noise, you were an executive with that company, right? Yeah. So I got approached by Nick Gross, who has Gross Labs, and he's the founder and owner of Big Noise, and John Cohen, who'd been, I think, a president at, was it BMG Records? Yes. And they had started a new venture called Big Noise with John Feldman. From Goldfinger. He's like he's Goldfinger basically. And they kind of approached me initially because I had Sound Revolver, and they were like, hey, we want to hire you for sync. And I was like, someone had put us in touch. I said, I'm not looking for a job. I have my production company, and you don't want to just sync, you want. And I kind of went through my whole spiel about custom and all the things I was doing. Sure. And they called me the next day and they're like, we love what you're doing. Would you come in and set up a whole division for us? So I went in-house with them, and the deal was that Sound Revolver went under their music group. They had a music group and a few sub-labels at the time. So as long as they had me, they had my custom production house, and then I set up their sync licensing division from scratch. So it was fun. It was a lot of work, but it was really fun. They had a couple sub-labels. At the time, we had Commission Records, which had Made in Tokyo, so there was some hip-hop. We had Cavalry, which had, I forget who it was. It was some legacy artists. Big Noise had a lot of, like, kind of more of the alt-punk style, and then I kind of had free reign to sign artists and do different deals. So while I was there, I built out like a pretty good joint venture. I would say like group of different, like I usually wouldn't sign individuals. Occasionally I would, but I would kind of do joint venture deals with smaller labels, producer cohorts, and just try to maximize the holes that we had. Like I think having been an artist on the other side, I knew what it was like to be in a sea of other people that sounded like me. So when I built out Big Noise's sync division, I made sure that I was filling gaps and not necessarily like just kind of signing a lot of the same stuff over and over again. Did Big Noise Down then have an affiliation with Hanoa Music?
Yeah, so Hanua had actually, oh my God, I love Ron,
Yeah,
Noah.
Ron Moss.
They're amazing. I actually think an underserved group of creatives are music producers. They'd been with Cobalt and they were doing really well. I think it's easy to overlook them because they have slices of big hits and they're not the artist breathing down the neck of the publisher for sync placements. But no one's necessarily working the catalog, I think, at the same rate because of that. They're getting there's enough money rolling in. You get the Pitbull thing, you get the Bieber, and it's their big placements.
That's right.
So, and they have admin deals. So one of the things that I had done with Noah and Ram when I brought them in was just kind of give them a little bit more visibility on what we were pitching them for, a little bit of strategy around what was coming out with their, different producers and those artists and projects. When I left Big Noise, I put a lot of those catalogs. So that catalog went to Rashad with Mad and Flow. And then Truly Music took over a few other things that I had. So I kind of handed things over and moved over to the blockchain gaming space that I'm in and then back to my custom house. Yeah. But, for me, it was about giving people that white glove attention. If I were to spiral up a sync division again, I would probably target producers and writers because it was more fun, hands-on, and I do think it's an underrepresented group for licensing.
We'll be right back after this. This season of Stereophonic is sponsored by Isotope, making innovative products that inspire and enable people to be creative using AI-powered tools for mixing, mastering, audio repair, and more. And by Odyssey, the leaders in planar magnetic technology. Odyssey delivers the best headphones money can buy. Odyssey is uncompromised audio. You allegedly busked on the streets. Did you play on the streets?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, I did.
Was it New York?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So when I got my first manager, I was playing a lot of coffee shops and stuff at home before college, and I don't think I knew. My parents were not they were supportive of me, but they weren't creative. They weren't in the arts, so I don't know if I knew what I had. I knew I was just obsessed. I wouldn't go anywhere without my guitar, but I don't think I understood what I could do with it. And I was playing in my dorm room in my freshman year, and I knock on the door, and it's the RA, and he's like, "Who's that?" And he had me play a Battle of the Bands that night for acoustic, and I ended up winning it. And it always stuck with me. So years later, what I would do when I was in New York, of course I was bartending and playing clubs, but I would sometimes just practice outside. And I would practice outside by the PATH trains and by some of the bigger subway stops at rush hour. And I would have a sign that said, "Money for homeless, not me." Food also. And what I would do is I would just have people, and people started bringing me sandwiches and things, and then I would go where I knew the homeless hung out by the science. No, but I would, because I wanted them to know. And actually people were a lot more, it's kind of sad, but generous with the not me, or they'd stop me and be like, "What's the not me?" And I was like, well, I could be doing this in my room. People are going to pay to see me later. Or I could do this on the street, and, you guys could maybe chip in, and I'm going to go bring some sandwiches by, where I know the homeless hang out by the science buildings at NYU and this and that. So yeah, I would practice outside, and I would get the money, and I would go over to the parks, and I would buy people food, and I would bring them sandwiches and things like that. So yeah.
Wow. Do you ever miss doing that?
I miss so I got in, there was a thing called Coffee House, Jeremy Koff. I don't know if you ever heard of it. And this was kind of around my Secret Road days, where they had handpicked, Jeremy Koff put together his favorite acoustic artists. And we started playing. It was really kind of amazing because he was pretty well off. I think he was in the medical field, and he just loved musicians. And he started, a little private circuit where we would go play house parties and events. But it wasn't where you're in the background where everybody else is just ignoring you and your wallpaper. It was these amazing showcases where people would sit down and be quiet. And it was a really special thing. They'd bring the sound system, and it was to hear these amazing acoustic players. And so I got to keep doing that a lot longer because I got into that network. And I still have friends occasionally who will be like, "Hey, do you want to meet me at Sundance and play my house party?" And now we've gotten to be friends. So I'll stay with them. And, you're not just the help. You have dinner, and you'll hop on stage and you'll play a few songs. So I get to scratch that itch occasionally, long and short of it. But do I miss the simple days of just singing? Yeah. And just playing, and yeah. Totally.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting with house concerts. I've talked to artists, and they don't have a big enough following maybe in a certain area to do a club kind of a thing or a concert kind of thing. So they will sort of build that with house concerts.
Yeah.
They will kind of build that. Or our friend Maya Sharp, she opens for Bonnie Raitt. She's been doing a tour this summer, playing big sheds and venues with Bonnie, opening shows. But when she's in town, maybe she'll pay for her trip here by doing a house concert somewhere. So, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's no lower level, higher level a lot of times. It's just, you're reaching people on, maybe there's 20 people, maybe there's 20,000 people.
Well, and I think that's the other part that I'm like I said, like, I think if you're in it as long as we've all been in it, like, there's an element of you just have to love it so much, right? It's not, you wouldn't, I was telling my parents when they were like, why don't you go to law school? Like, I have a politics degree from NYU. They were like, I handed it back to them and like went back to playing clubs and bartending. And I explained to them, I was like, you wouldn't choose this, it's just such a genuine love and calling in a way you relate to the world. And I would say, suffice to say, when you mention like selling out, major arenas or playing house concerts, or even like, Kay Hanleys of the world who led us to Cleo and, and now writes on a ton of shows with, Michelle Lewis, that one of her main writing partners, like it sounds cheesy to say it's not the destination, it's the journey, but that really is it. Like, you play every gig like it's 10,000 people, or more. You just show up, and if you get to do what you love and you can sustain it, like, that energetically follows you, and I think the other thing too is the humility and the constantly learning. Like, my friends we've been in it, like, you look around and people drop out, right? Like, they're like, they get tired, or they move on, or they, or they get bitter, or they just don't want to do the same hustle anymore. Yeah. And the one thing I notice with the people that I love who have been around forever, who've mentored me, or my current running buddies, is just this willingness to, again, not have people pay their dues, is to lift each other up. But we're also just always learning. Like, we're always sending each other, like, did you hear this singer? Like, hey, did you hear this new sound? Like, we're just such like genuine lovers of music and learning that, like, that's the one thing I see that doesn't end, is this curiosity and this genuine desire to keep bettering the craft.
Yeah, music information is always something that I and the people I'm around, we always want to know more about it.
Yeah.
It might have been something that happened 50 years ago, but we want to know about it because everything influences what we hear now in a lot of ways. I mean, there's not old music, not new music, it's just music. Yeah. And it continues. So I applaud your efforts all in doing that. You talked about mentorship. And again, I think for women coming into our business right now, and what you said is something that some of our guests have said, that we've always been here, but now we're here.
Yes.
And I think about that sometimes with queer people or people in the non-binary space as well. Like, there's no secret that this is an area of creativity. It's just more seeing. When you see people like you, it gives you power to come in and do what you want to do. Yeah,
and there's also like, I just spoke at Gabby Cooklani, who used to be with Universal, and now she has Gray Admin. She started an admin company. She was she opened so many doors for me when I first started out. She's incredible. We're still close. She started this thing called Pop Out LA, and it was a queer music conference, and the goal was kind of bridging that gap between established professionals and established creatives at a certain level and up and coming, so that people could see each other. And I got asked some really interesting questions. There was one trans producer, and he raised his hand and he said, I really want to represent my trans community, and he's like, I can pass. He's like, you people don't always notice, and he's like, I'm lucky I can pass. He said, but I struggle because I also want to be judged as a producer, not the trans producer. And so, like, I think it's the same, like, with any community you identify with. Like, there have been times where, it's great to get work, but I've had contracts where people have given them to me before they were trying to say, look, we hired a woman. Look, we hired a queer person. And I'm like, wow, you've been hiring me for years when I was just me because I was talented. So I do think it's a fine line.
Yeah, exactly. Also have a look at elements that might have been a hindrance on some perception level at another historic decade. Now they're superpowers. Yeah. So I just try to always emphasize too, especially with working in the music education thing, like whatever your reality is can work for you or against you depending on the way it's played.
Well, and undeniable talent right?
Yeah.
Undeniable talent and drive. And, I think we are very fortunate to be in entertainment. It is a lot more forgiving. Like, we are not, there are other professions where it doesn't matter how smart or talented you are. If you're from, an underserved population, it's really hard to break through. I think creativity has a much wider range of quirkiness for, things like that. And there are, of course, like glass ceilings, and there are rooms that people aren't allowed, are still gated or not allowed equal access to. But I do think it is a place where that talent really can drive forward. And if you manage to break through, that's, again, if you're going to pay it forward, that's paying it forward, right? You turn around and you're like, I can make this easier. That kid's really talented too, and I want to give them an opportunity that I didn't have.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's in the future for you? What do you see what's happening in the next 6 months that we should know about?
In the next 6 months.
Yeah.
The gaming company I'm with just launched, it's called Tribes. We just launched our beta version of our game. I might do the music for it. We've been in talks about it. It just depends on like what budget we have and kind of like how many reiterations of it we want to do. But it would be a fun project if I did the music side of it also. On that, I'm the chief growth officer, so I'm overseeing like brand and story and partnerships. So I have that on the horizon for gaming. I have a company called Register One. So it's register1.io, and we're basically we just finished our prototype and we're in the process of doing a raise. The goal for that is blockchain technology ledger. We're trying to create the first publicly free, transparent database of rights. Wow. And to not compete with the PROs or your publisher, but just have one place. Like my thing is you should only have to register in one place. And then it shows you where your money is. It pushes out. It reads those databases. So you can have signed up for all of those services to collect for you, but just log into one place and just see it all in one place and resolve your discrepancies in one place. So Register One, I'm spending a good amount of time doing. I'm also developing a music series and a show with a few friends that I can't talk about yet, but I'm really excited about that. And Sound Revolver still does a bunch of productions and projects, and I tap in on the shows. Like, again, if it's a good fit for me creatively, then I'm the person that produces and writes on it. Otherwise, I still hire producers and writers on projects and collaborate.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Jess Furman, we're ready to plug you into an electric car because we could definitely get a lot of power from you coming
Since
off.
you offered me cookies, I was like, you do not want me on more sugar. Trust me.
It's all fun. We appreciate your energy so much. And thank you for being our guest.
Thank you for having me. This is so wonderful. I love talking about this stuff. And thank you for creating a platform where people can learn. It's a really amazing thing. So
we're learning a lot too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Storyophonic. Our shows are recorded, produced, and mixed by Lindsay Tomasic. Kim Strand is our production director. Our theme song is by Daddle Light Mine. Give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Special thanks to our season sponsors, Isotope and Novation. I'm Dan Kimpel on Storyophonic.